What's up guys, it's Liam. Today's video is going to be just a little technique tip, a little piece of advice for dynamic movement, getting better at those big, fast motions. Yeah! So our end goal from this tip is going to be to get better at being close to the wall as you stick and latch holds.
Come on.
Yeah, finishing your movement close to the wall with your hips in, your body in, your body tensed so that you can stick moves better. The reason for this is because when you're sticking a dynamic movement, you don't want a whole lot of outward force as you are latching a hold or latching a move. You don't want a force that's pulling you away from the wall. That's going to make it harder to stick, like with your contact strength with your hands. It's going to make it harder to hold swings if you're taking a swing, and it's also going to make it a lot harder to keep your feet on, which might be the most important thing of all. So that's sort of our end goal. The other product of this technique is you're going to be learning to climb in a way that's a bit more efficient and uses a bit less strength to make these dynamic moves. So to start, I'm going to introduce a pretty common misconception. And that is the idea that when you're making a dynamic move, be it a dyno, a dead point, whatever it is, that you should be keeping your hips in close to the wall the entire time. So that means, basically pulling in and staying in. Let's think about that a little bit. So if you're starting with your hips and your body in real close to the wall at the start of a movement, you're generating a lot of force. Your body's going up. Basically, your body has nowhere to go but outwards. And so as a result, like I said, you're going to be generating a lot of outward force that's going to make it harder to hold swings, latch holds, and keep your feet on. So I hear coaches say this, I hear people teaching their friends to climb say this, and I don't think it's like totally wrong, and I'll explain why later, but I think for dynamic movement, it's generally a bit misguided. Okay. So if we're not keeping our hips in close to the wall the whole time throughout a dynamic movement, what should we be doing instead? How are we going to finish and latch that hold with our hips in? Well, the concept here is super simple. And basically the idea is that you need to go out to go in. So if you start close, you have nowhere to go but out. But if you start a little sagged, a little bit out from the wall, as you make that movement, you're going in towards the wall. And so as a result, when you finish that move, you're going to be in close. So basically, all this really looks like is when you set up on those holds to make your move, you're going to sag out a little bit, right? And then as you make the move, you're going to be pulling in, not just with your arms, but also really heavily with your legs. And you're kind of going to be like thrusting those hips in towards the wall. And that way, you're going to finish the move close. You're going to start out, and you're going to go in.
Whoa!
That's really basically the whole concept. What that means is not only are we allowing ourselves to finish close to the wall, we're also using less strength because we're not trying to stay tight and tense throughout our entire motion. We're not like constantly thinking about how close our hips into the wall. We're just starting out and we're just letting our momentum naturally take us in towards the wall. And the last part of this is that when we do stick the hold, that is going to be the time that we start generating tension, in our hands on the hold, but also in our legs so that we're, holding tight, and also just like in our core. So that's sort of the finish to it is you start out, you go in using momentum, and then at the end, when you need to stick, that's when you're going to tense. But what I do want to address, I'm talking about dynamic movement here. So that concept of keeping your hips in actually really does have a place in climbing. So when you're doing a lock-off or some sort of static motion and you need to generate tension the whole time to move slow enough to reach that hold, yeah, you're going to want to have your hips in because that way you're transferring weight out of your arms, out of your forearms, out of your fingers, into your legs, into your core, into your shoulders. And that is going to help you just like really use your full body to generate tension. So, like I said, this concept that I'm talking about of going out to go in is really going to apply a lot more to dynamic movement. Don't throw out keeping your hips in close. Just remember that it's not always applicable. Static and dynamic movement are pretty different in climbing, and as a result, we're not just going to approach them differently in terms of how we use our muscles, but we're also going to approach them differently in terms of our overall technique. Okay, so we've got the concept. It's really pretty simple. We're going out to go in. How do we get better at this? How do we implement this into our climbing? This is going to be pretty simple. When you're projecting, even if you're not projecting, if you're just on something easier and it's got dynamic movement, that's going to be the time to practice this. So if you're on a dynamic movement like a dead point or a dyno and you're struggling with it, or your feet are coming off and you feel like they shouldn't be, that's when you're going to try it out. You're going to try and just sag out a little bit in your arms and your hips and your butt, and then pull inwards with your legs and your arms as well as upwards as you make that motion. And yeah, you're just gonna see how that affects the movement. At first it might feel a little unnatural, but ultimately I think that people are gonna have some good luck with this. And yeah, basically it's gonna come down to experimentation, because the motion is not gonna be the same for every movement. Some moves are faster and some moves are slower, and how much you sag is gonna be sort of according to that. And some moves, like, you need to use more power out of your legs, you need to generate more upwards motion. So figuring that out is going to vary a lot from move to move, but it's sort of a general concept to put in your bag of tricks for climbing movement. One thing, like, if you feel like the whole sagging out thing, like if you feel like you're really over exaggerating it, maybe that's not going to be the most efficient way to climb, so maybe dialing it back a little bit. But conversely, it might feel like you're really over exaggerating it, and in reality you're just not used to it at all, and you're not actually sticking your butt out very far at all. So if it's not working in that way, you can try and experiment more in that direction. So yeah, it's just practice, it's experimenting. The biggest type of move that I would really recommend trying this on is a dynamic move where you're finding that your foot cuts even though you have like the length from your foot to your hand to keep it on. So that's the type of move where I'd really recommend like sort of experimenting, like if you sag out and then pull in at the hold, can you then keep the foot on? That's probably the biggest place that you'll find that this will help you out, honestly. But yeah, dynos, parkour moves, whatever it is, like you can apply it anywhere, and it's just gonna take practice. I just wanted to touch on a few strength deficiencies that are gonna make this a little bit harder. So if you are weaker in your fingers and hands, that's gonna make sagging out a little bit harder. Like you need to be kind of strong on holds to be able to sag out like that. Also, if you're weak in like your biceps and lats and shoulders, your things that help you pull in, that's gonna make things a bit harder as well. And then lastly, if you're really weak in your legs, that's probably the biggest one. This is gonna be a harder concept to learn. That does not mean that you shouldn't try. It doesn't even necessarily mean that you should go out and train those things, because I think that those strengths will naturally sort of start to improve as you try this technique. But it's something to watch for, and if you're really struggling with the concept, maybe thinking about like, oh, well, are my legs really weak? Is something I could be doing to work on that?
Last thing I wanted to say is that this is absolutely not a hard and fast rule for dynamic movement. I included this video because the jump on top notch is a move where you kind of want to stay in the whole time, otherwise you'd take a pretty weird swing. So it's not hard and fast. It's more just something that can be useful rather than something that is the rule.
So yeah, I hope that you guys get the chance to try this out, see if it works. I hope you find it helpful. If you do, or if you try it and it doesn't really work for you, please feel free to let us know in the comments. Or if you have a different opinion about how to approach dynamic movement and you don't think this is the way, I would love to have a conversation about that. So yeah, let us know, and I hope you guys have a great day, a great week, a great month, and a great year.